And opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or NextGen Media Group.
Adam Laxalt fought against question 1 before it was on the ballot.
Today on Politics Now, a Clark County judge calls the gun background check initiative poorly written and says it can't be implemented. Why Adam Laxalt calls the decision vindication, Democrats are not giving up on the issue.
Unfortunately, there is no perfect solution or one solution that solves for all.
The Homeland Security Secretary was in Las Vegas talking about beefing up security and safety at our local schools. Plus,
the college affordability always tops the cake.
How a Democratic group backed by a billionaire is trying to energize young voters to swing the election.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now with Steve Sebelius and Patrick Walker.
Well, a Clark County judge has struck down a lawsuit seeking to implement the stalled initiative requiring background checks for every gun sale in Nevada. Voters narrowly approved the law in 2016, but it was never implemented. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Sebelius.
And I'm Patrick Walker. Now, from the beginning, this was controversial. When the dust settled on election night, question 1 as it appeared on the ballot passed by less than 1%. But a Clark County judge sided with the governor and the Attorney General, saying the law is unenforceable. For supporters of Nevada's law requiring background checks on private gun sales, Monday's ruling to strike a lawsuit to force the implementation of the nearly 2-year-old ballot initiative is deflating.
I think it's really unfortunate. The will of the voters here on question 1 was to implement universal background checks.
Former State Senator Justin Jones helped write the ballot initiative and sponsored a similar bill that was vetoed by Governor Sandoval in 2013. In his ruling on this case, Judge Joe Hardy Jr. said that the state cannot force the FBI to perform background checks as written in the law. The agency has refused to do so. As a result, Attorney General Adam Laxalt issued a legal opinion that because of that, the law was unenforceable.
Adam Laxalt fought against question 1 before it was on the ballot, when it was on the ballot, and afterwards.
Stand with law enforcement and vote no on question 1.
Laxalt did oppose question 1, but Judge Hardy ruled that both the Attorney General and the Governor made attempts to convince FBI officials to perform the background checks after the law passed. Laxalt addressed the issue in a radio interview with KXNT radio host Alan Stock last week.
I was asked by a state agency, the Department of Public Safety, that currently does background checks in our state. What do we do with this ballot initiative? And we said, you know, if the FBI won't do this, it's hard to see how this is enforceable.
Opponents to the ballot initiative say the law was poorly written, thus making the law unenforceable. And another point underscoring how politically charged this initiative was, 2 camps provided the bulk of the funding both for and against question 1. So let's take a look at by the numbers here. Of the $19 million raised by Nevadans for background checks, more than $18 million came from former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg or his political action committee, Every Town for Gun Safety. The NRA donated virtually all of the $6.5 million spent against the initiative. So, Steve, really, when you talk about money, the initiative's fatal flaw, that's something it came down to as well.
Yeah, the backers of question 1 could easily have said, look, all gun sales in Nevada require a background check using the state's existing system, which includes the FBI's NICS database, and it carries a fee. But if they had attached a fee to that initiative, it probably would have doomed it. We saw earlier how close it was on the ballot. And so they decided to leave that out, said the FBI alone should conduct those background checks at no cost to the state. That helped it pass at the ballot box, but it doomed it in court.
Well, another emerging topic in the governor's race is Nevada's efforts to reduce the backlog of more than 7,000 rape kits. There are a pair of hard-hitting new attack ads leveled at Democrat Steve Sisolak on this.
Now, these ads are probably the most brutal of the race so far. Take a look.
Under his watch, Steve Sisolak allowed the number of untested rape kits in Clark County to increase by more than 3,000. 3,000.
In this ad, the Laxalt campaign accuses Sisolak of ignoring the growing problem as a Clark County commissioner. Now, it's true the number of untested kits did grow, although in some cases the kits weren't needed for prosecution or the case lacked a cooperative witness. Even former First Assistant Attorney General Wes Duncan said at a Republican Women's Club meeting in 2016 that the more viable cases were always moved to the front of the line. And even Laxalt himself acknowledged at a town hall meeting in 2016 that the main reason the backlog grew was funding. Now, he was able to overcome that problem by taking advantage of a federal grant and money from a legal settlement. Still, a Laxalt campaign spokesman said if Sisolak had wanted to find money to reduce the backlog, he could have done so. The Metro Police Officers Union, which has endorsed Sisolak, said Laxalt shouldn't take credit for fixing the backlog when it was the result of efforts of many people and organizations. But this ad gets even more brutal.
At the same time, Sisolak cut funding for rape victims' counseling services in Clark County. Rape victims clearly weren't a priority to Steve Sisolak. We'll never know how many violent criminals got away with rape, but we do know who to blame, Mr. Sisolak.
Well, now that charge is technically correct, but actually not true. The commission did approve a budget with a $50,000 cut in counseling for services in fiscal year 2015. But actual spending between 2014 and 2015 increased by more than $400,000. Clark County spokesman said no rape victims who needed counseling services were ever turned away, and the county covered the costs that exceeded its budget. Now, for its part, the Sisolak campaign called the ad tasteless and wildly misleading and maintained that Laxalt's record on women's issues is weak.
So, as you mentioned, there are two ads that are running, but this one that we just showed you, that's the one that's up in Reno, correct?
Right, that's running up in Reno, and there's a good reason for that. A recent poll conducted by the Reno Gazette-Journal that we reported on this show said that Sisolak and Laxalt are virtually tied in Reno, and Laxalt needs to increase his margin there by quite a bit if he's going to win the race.
Well, Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, joined federal officials in Las Vegas Thursday to talk about school safety. Las Vegas's Miley Achievement Center hosted the listening session for the Federal Commission on School Safety, which President Trump created back in March. CCSD Police Chief James Ketsa has testified that his 171 officers are able to monitor some 16,000 cameras and 125,000 door and window sensors and smoke detectors to analyze and respond to threats. Secretary Nielsen told the group that technology is a big focus of the Commission's recommendations, along with hardening schools with stronger building materials for safe space, for example, and entry controls. Nielsen also mentioned mental health, saying, really everything must be on the table.
We also plan on stressing that schools use a layered approach to security. We at DHS have found this to be the only way to do security in communities. So it's layers of security. Unfortunately, there is no perfect solution or one solution that solves for all.
Well, progressive organizations are calling the Trump administration's efforts into question. Among several statements that were issued, Battleboard Progress Executive Director Annette Magnus said in part, quote, more guns are appearing in schools, our schools lack funding, and many of our families suffering because of a violent, inhumane immigration system. If Secretary Nielsen wants to step foot in our city, she needs to understand our very real issues first, end quote. Well, coming up, a group aimed at exciting millennials.
And ever since NextGen's founding in 2013, they've had a dedicated staff presence every cycle in Nevada.
I caught up with the NextGen organization in southern Nevada as they try to recruit the sleeping voter bloc of college students. That's coming up.
You can't say there.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
The Republican Attorney General's Association has launched a new round of ads against Democratic candidate Aaron Ford.
Arrested 4 times, stealing, public intoxication, investigated for trespassing.
The ad highlights Ford's college arrest that he talked about first here on 8 News Now.
It has also released an attack website that contains the longest URL I have ever seen on one of these. Let's take a deep breath. You ready? What happens in College Station will stay on your record forever.com. Now, we should also point out that those arrests they're arrests, they're not convictions, and also none of them led to any jail time.
And in other ragged news, the group challenged Ford to release his state bar applications to check if he disclosed those arrests. Ford showed his application to the Review-Journal, and he did disclose those college arrests. And the Tom Steyer organization, NextGen, is out with Dean Heller attack ads. That's a child crying in the background of that ad. Steyer has pledged to spend at least $2 million to try to unseat Heller, so expect to see a lot more of those.
Well, NextGen has started ramping up its millennial recruitment efforts this week. I interviewed their state youth director, Tyson McGowan, about their focus on really what they want to try to accomplish during a recruitment effort over at UNLV this week. How important is it for you to be out here and really get young people at the colleges registered to vote and getting involved in the political process?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. In a battleground state like Nevada, where the margins are always tight for every single race, you know, increasing the youth voter turnout is going to be pivotal in seeing the kind of, you know, progressive victories that folks want to see this November.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of the goals out here. Do you have a target number of students that you want to get registered, or what are you looking to get done in the next couple of days while you're out here on campus?
Well, it's really a twofold process. First step is getting them registered, and the second step is keeping them active. All right, so we start the conversation with getting them registered to vote, and then it's asking them to pledge to vote, asking them to join our volunteer activities, and really making sure that even after November they're staying active in their communities, making sure that this is really the start of their process and their right as a citizen, and we want to make sure that, you know, they're exercising that, whether that's voting or running for office or supporting candidates, right? We want to make sure it's all-encompassing.
NextGen has really made it a point to reach out to millennials and to reach out to that next generation now that is coming into college. Why is that such a big deal to reach that demographic?
Well, first and foremost, they're the larger voting demographic in our population, right? Just because they haven't turned out previously doesn't mean that they aren't the largest voting bloc. And so it's one that we should be talking to, we should be engaging with. And, you know, I'd say time and again, we've seen young people tell us they're just sick and tired of seeing complex, tough issues that politicians and folks older than them aren't willing to solve, right? It's that same old, you know, oh, this is really too tough, this is too difficult, we can't make this work. We're really starting to see young people stand up and say, that's BS, we're not going to take it anymore, and we need to get active to solve that.
What are the big issues that NextGen really wants to try to drive home with millennials, and what are the ones that you're hearing from the students you're talking to?
Sure. The top issues that we've seen from folks, and we've been asking them very dedicatedly for really now over a year, is college affordability is always tops the cake. Next up is access to affordable health care, and then racial justice and equity issues are really the ones that are really driving them home for us. Another key one that we've seen, especially after the Parkland shooting, is really what are we doing to make sure our communities are safe from gun violence? You know, you look at what happened on October 1st, and as tragic as that was, and as amazing as it was to see the community unite around that tragedy and help so many people, from a policy standpoint, absolutely nothing has been done, and young people notice that, and they're sick of it.
How important is Nevada in the scheme of NextGen as far as a place to focus efforts?
Oh, absolutely crucial. I mean, ever since NextGen's founding in 2013, they've had a dedicated staff presence every cycle in Nevada, whether that's 2014, 2016, now. We're already looking ahead. We're looking at taking the student capacity, the organizing capacity that we have, and really looking and focusing that at the state legislative races, or state legislative session rather, in 2019, because there's just too much at stake, and we've seen firsthand, you know, if you're active, if you're making a difference, you can change legislation.
And Steyer has an initiative called NextGen Rising, where he is spending $30 million focused on 10 battleground states in an effort to help Democrats seize control of Congress. He spent $91 million on a similar effort in 2016, another $20 million in an attempt to impeach President Trump. So, Steve, when you look at those billions and billions of dollars, is it money that's been well spent?
Well, not if you judge by the results, because obviously Democrats are not in charge in the House. President Trump has not been impeached. But I interviewed Steyer when he was here to set up that program in Las Vegas, and he seemed to be very committed to the long haul, doing it for the long haul. And remember, in the end, it's going to be less about what's in the news and more about voter turnout. So he's focusing on the right thing.
Well, a rough week for President Donald Trump.
They're looking, they can't stand it, that they've looked for something, they've never been able to find anything at all against Donald Trump. So they wind up with Manafort.
Jail. The face-off panel takes on Manafort's conviction, Cohen's plea deal, and what it means for Republicans here counting on the president's support.
And competing polls paint different pictures in the Congressional District 4 race. We'll break them down for you next on Politics Now. President Trump is facing new legal troubles after his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, took a plea deal in which he claimed under oath that Trump directed him to pay two women to stay quiet about alleged affairs in order to influence the 2016 election. That came on the same day as his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was convicted on 8 counts of tax and bank fraud. So how will this affect Republicans in Nevada counting on Trump for re-election help? Our face-off panel weighs in. Here's KXNT radio host Alan Stock from the right and Battleborn Progress Executive Director Annette Magnus from the left.
I'm not surprised that any of this has happened. I mean, we've been talking about how, you know, the folks around Trump, the folks that Trump surrounds himself with, have significant legal problems, and it wouldn't surprise me if things start to fall and start to implicate the president as well. And so I'm not surprised by any of this. I think you start to see more dominoes continue to fall. I think you see people around him, around the president, continue to start to talk and start to say things. I mean, you have Omarosa talking now with her tapes and her books and all of this stuff. And look, at the end of the day, you are judged also by the people who you surround yourself with. And if you surround yourself with people like Michael Cohen who are willing to rat you out, I'm sorry, I judge that as a leadership flaw, as a character flaw for the president. And I think all of this, everything that happened this Tuesday, speaks volumes for this presidency.
As part of that plea, Michael Cohen did implicate the president, at least in the context of directing him to make the payment. But what does this mean for the president?
Well, first of all, Omarosa is the most discredited person that has ever lived, just about. She's irrelevant. She's lied through her teeth in that book, and people who she has quoted as saying things have already come out, several people, and said that that didn't happen. It's an absolute lie. So she's just trying to make things up as it goes along. So she's irrelevant. The fact is that there's been an effort from the day that Trump announced his candidacy to the time that he got the nomination to the time that he won to the time that he actually wound up taking office in his inauguration. The left has consistently wanted to be able to go after him and find a reason to get him out of office. They hate his guts. They can't stand what he's doing. This witch hunt was supposed to have ended by the end of last December. It was supposed to have ended last December. That was the date they picked. We're out here 8 months later, or whatever it is, about 8 months later or so, and it's still going on. They're looking. They can't stand it that they've looked for something. They've never been able to find anything at all against Donald Trump. So they wind up with Manafort. Manafort is not Trump. Mueller is not Cohen is not Trump. They cannot find anything against Trump. That bothers them so much. So we're going to get anybody else we can around them. Good luck. Keep searching. Keep looking.
Does this have any impact on that as the president campaigns with Republicans?
Absolutely. I don't know why Dean Heller would want Donald Trump out here campaigning for him. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. They should be running from Donald Trump at this point, but they're not. And the fact of the matter is, Dean Heller is complicit in all of this. He has not said a word, not one word, and I'm sorry, they're giant hypocrites. They, again, would have gone after a Democrat with no problem whatsoever. But Dean Heller has been completely silent on this, and now he wants to campaign with Donald Trump. You know, 2 years ago, he basically was bought and paid for by Donald Trump because he did exactly what he wanted him to do on the health care bill.
Most that he has campaigned for across the country have won, number one. Number two, I think what he wants to do is, and what he has done in other parts of the country, excite his base. In other words, make sure the Republicans do get out and vote.
You can watch more of that debate and a discussion on whether the background check ruling really does vindicate Adam Laxalt. That's on LasVegasNow.com. Patrick?
All right, Steve, this is The Race Now, where we update you on some of the other big election news that's happening right now. Congressional District 4 Republican candidate Crescent Hardy had some campaign help this week. House Majority Leader Paul Ryan was in town and joined a panel discussion with Hardy about the local nonprofit Prisoners for Hope. Hardy and Paul were in Congress together from 2014 until 2016. Well, Hardy's opponent in that race is fellow former Congressman, Democrat Stephen Horsford. Two polls that are out right now paint a very different picture of that race. Horsford's campaign releasing a poll that shows him 10 points ahead. A few days later, Hardy released his own poll with a dead heat in the race. That's what it was showing. Well, earlier we talked about Tom Steyer shelling out some big money for Democrats. Billionaire casino mogul Sheldon Adelson is also spending tons of dough on Republican efforts. Adelson and his wife Miriam gave $25 million to the Senate Leadership Fund. That's the super PAC charged with keeping the Senate in Republican hands. It's more than half of the $44 million that the PAC has raised this year. A few months ago, he gave $30 million to a super PAC trying to protect the Republican majority over in the House. So, Steve, I want to go back to that House race, CD4 that we were just talking about. Major differences in those polls, what were they?
Well, Horsford's poll included all the third-party and independent candidates, and Hardy's did not, just the two top candidates. And the Horsford poll also had a registration sampling that's closer to the district's actual registration. Democrats there have a 9-point advantage, but registration does not equal victory because that's what turnout is for. And we saw that in 2014 when Horsford lost to Hardy. So that's something that we got to keep in mind there.
Well, President Trump is giving Nevada Republicans some campaign help. We'll tell you all about it coming up on Politics Now.
ClarkBernstein.com.
Clark County Commissioners have given final approval for a major public works project in Laughlin. Commissioners approved a $3.4 million contract to begin working on the Laughlin Lagoon. It's along the Colorado River. The project calls for dredging the 1.5-mile-long bay, creating the only still water lagoon on the lower Colorado River, which is a key piece to the development along the Laughlin riverfront.
It's ready to go with respect to high-end commercial development, residential development. Obviously, it's going to be driven by the recreational demands of the housing boom we've had in Laughlin.
Robert Bilbray is spearheading the lagoon project. He says Laughlin's population has grown by nearly 2/3 over the past 2.5 years, and this project will help diversify the small town's economy. Construction can begin as soon as September 1st.
Time now for What to Watch, where we tell you about what we are keeping an eye on coming up in the near future. President Trump is making a return trip to Las Vegas in September to campaign for Republican candidates. The details on that one, however, have not been announced.
And the hearings for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh begin September 4th. The White House and Senate Republicans have rejected Democrats' efforts to delay the hearings in light of recent legal troubles for Donald Trump. Well, thanks for watching Politics Now on this Sunday morning. A quick program note, next week we return to our regular time. That's 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, so be sure to tune in then. You can email me at sebelius@lasvegasnow.com.
My email is pwalker@lasvegasnow.com. Stay up to date and watch us online right here every Saturday.